And again, thanks for everybody who's coming along today. It looks like we have a pretty good range of people, although there's a lot more people on the call than have submitted the poll, and that's okay too. We're just getting started with this new format of webinar, and because of that, I wanted to make sure that we could do polls and things like that, and we're going to ask you at the end to give us some feedback. So make sure you do give us feedback. We're switching from Teams live event to Teams webinar today to see how that goes with everybody, and you'll maybe notice some differences. So I'm Barb O'Donnell. I work for the DFC and CARA National Evaluation, and my team is also on here doing some support today. And during this presentation today, we're actually going to have two of our DFC coalitions sharing their experiences engagement with the school sector, and also how that contributes to their engagement with youth and other sectors as well. So it's going to hit across the board. And so welcome Laura Morris from Be the Influence in Maine, and Benjamin Des Melissa from Harvey County Defy, which is also Stand Defy. So again, thank you. One of the things you'll notice about this format that I'm going to share here in a second, I'm going to go ahead and go forward. This is just a reminder about closed captioning. If anybody on there would like to see closed captioning during the call. Oops, we might have to, is the, oh here, I just need to close it. Okay. So you just have to click on that little CC button and you'll be able to close out to see the closed captioning. And if you're watching this on a recording and you want to get the file, then you can reach out to us and we'll share that file with you. Okay, so one of the things you might want to, oops, sorry. One of the things you might want to know about today is how can I ask a question if I have a question? And the way you'll do that is in the chat box where you've been introducing yourself. When you do go to ask a question, you might go ahead and put a question mark at the beginning of your question just to let us know for sure. You might have comments throughout too or whatever. We'll try to read through all of those, but if we see something with a question mark, we'll definitely try to get to it and answer it at the end. And if you know it's directed at someone, if it's directed at me, you can say Barb or eval question. If it's directed at Laura, you can say Laura or BTI. And if it's directed at Des, Benjamin, or Melissa, you can put probably just Des is the easiest, and then go ahead and put Stand next to it, and that'll get to them. Just so you're aware, we did not prevent you from forwarding the slides yourself in this mode. I'm going to be forwarding as I go through, and then I'll turn it over to my teammates who will also be doing that. So with great power comes great responsibility. So if you get out of alignment with the slide deck, you might want to click back on that to presenter button to get back to where we actually are. So I would not necessarily encourage you to do something even though you have the power to do that. This is our ever-present reminder about the White House, this grant program. These grant programs, both DFC and CARA, are funded by the Office of National Drug Control Policy. They're responsible for its overall mission, for keeping everything in alignment. And then, as you know, the new partner is CDC's National Center for Injury Prevention and Control that provides grant management support. You have our team that provides evaluation support. We're going to be doing another webinar, helpless plug, in November, just to make sure everybody does know what they can get from us versus local evaluators, and maybe things not therefore to be getting from local evaluators, because you can get it for free from us. So you shouldn't be paying people for it. And then finally, there's CATCA, and they provide all kinds of coalition development support. I also wanted to talk about two featured resources that are out in the DFC Me Learning Center. If anybody on here is not able to access those systems, if you heard about this webinar some other way, let us know and we can share those links with you directly. So you can just email us at DFC_evaluators. I'm going to be talking about the issue brief a little bit. I'm not going to read it to you. I'm not going to highlight everything in it. I try to keep it very high level. So I just wanted to note that. And as you know, this is kind of a follow-on to CDC did a really great webinar in August about working with schools and highlighted a lot of the research on working with schools. So it's also a great resource for you and to be aware of all the things that CDC offers you as far as resources. And again, it's very much in line with what we've been learning from what the actual work of DFC recipients are. So again, I'm going to introduce you to the brief. The data in the brief really come from some site visits we conducted starting in fall about a year ago through January of 2021. And thank you to all our virtual, I don't know if anybody else is on here. The 2 coalitions who are with us today both participated in those site visits. And again, we made a decision to include them. That doesn't mean anybody else was less valued. Everybody had great things to tell us. It's just hard to bring in everyone, but I really do appreciate your work. We also included data from both the February and August progress reports. And again, in case anyone has lost concept of time at this point, February was actually pre-COVID. It had not yet hit in the United States when people were completing their February progress report. But by August, we were dead smack in the middle of it. So that was something that kind of played a role in things we were looking at to see how it looked for school engagement. And we're going to walk through some general information about school engagement, and then we're going to revisit with our coalitions about what that looks like during COVID, because I'm sure that's part of the questions some of you have. One of the things we know is that 88% of DFCs are working in at least one school in at least one district. And I think we have another poll question for you right now, just to get a sense for people who are with us today, the extent to which you're working with schools and school districts. So of the people that were, I see in a new strategy here, it's right over my slide. So now it's over my legend and I'm going to mess it up because I didn't put it on another screen. But I think I'll get this right. The 51%, that is 29% plus 22% are, so these were of the coalitions who indicated they were working with the school, not the other 12% who said they were not. About half of them were working with one district, roughly. 44% were working with multiple school districts, so even more engagement in some ways with schools or more people to have to figure out how to work with. And about 5%, we were working on that question to kind of clean it up. It's probably going to look a little more like what I have right here on the list. So let's see how this poll is going. I want to see if I can find the answers to it in the chat box here. I'm not seeing it yet. I'll just have to weed through the chat, I think, till it pops up. Hopefully you all are seeing it in the chat as well.
It looks like we have about 43% of us having multiple schools, multiple districts, followed by 30 people working with multiple schools in a single district.
Okay, you were a little fuzzy there, Kathleen, but I think it sounded like it's pretty similar to what we're seeing overall on the screen here. Okay. All right. Thanks, everybody. And this is just what I'm going to hit from the brief is just some of our key takeaways so that we really can focus on the stories from the coalitions. So one of the big key takeaways is that if you're going to engage with any sector, it's probably two, but certainly with the school sector, you have to engage in effective and ongoing communication strategies. School engagement doesn't happen because you wish it to, right? It happens because of the work you put into it. And many coalitions talked about identifying a key taker. Somebody called it the mover and shakers, right? And who that was differed across schools. Some schools, it's the superintendent, some it's the principal, some it's a health teacher. Sometimes it's somebody working on a grant, other federal grants, so they kind of feel like they have something in common with you. So again, find that person who can get your foot in the door and then build your relationship in any direction you need to from there. And if you're engaging with school leadership, and even if you're not, but school leadership needs to be involved, You need to be prepared for change. That was probably one of the more common challenges we hear from coalitions, is that school leadership, we get new principals, new superintendents, right about the time you feel like everything's going great, somebody changes. You just need to be prepared for that and accept it's going to happen, instead of getting caught up in maybe hoping that it won't. If it hasn't ever happened to you, then you're lucky, and that's great. I think the last thing I wanted to put in here is, as you're working with schools and communicate with them, focus on your wins. Focus on how you can support schools as well, not just what schools can do for you. Equal relationships are always better than things where schools feel like, oh, you need this from us, and you need this from us, and you need this from us. What am I getting out of it? What's my win message, right? So the easier you make it a win-win, the better off it is for everybody. The second piece here is to emphasize how DFC coalitions can support schools in supporting the whole child. To some extent, what we heard from some of the coalitions that we talked to is that if the schools were already there, it was easier to work with the schools. That schools who are already taking a whole child approach or a trauma-informed approach, they helped you have a foot in the door because they're already thinking about issues above and beyond academics or understanding how it connects to academics. But what I'll say with that is you may have to find the common language with your school district. So I used a few of them here. So again, is it ACEs? Is that language that they understand and know? Is it social emotional learning, whole child approach? That's what they know. Is it bullying? What's the foot in the door? Most schools are probably talking about something in that range. If you feel like they aren't and you have to start with academics, that's okay too. And you may want to just build from that up. So again, nothing is a loss, but I will say for some people, it is an easier step if the school is already there to some extent, right? When schools already see their role as not being just to educate children, but to support their overall growth. Focus on encouraging, supporting youth leadership of coalition activities, both in schools and in the wider community. This was really clear as well. So again, youth and youth coalitions are highly integrated with school sectors. I'm sure there is somebody out there running a youth coalition, not through a school, but I'm also really positive that probably over 90% of them are linked to schools. Schools are where kids are. We connect with them. And again, what a lot of what's happening in those are helping those youth get skills that the school, again, wants to see their youth have in their community. So you get payoff and better engagement from the youth. Think about identifying issues and how to address by school rather than across all schools. This was really clear as well. And we heard this from small rural coalitions who were only working, with 2 schools, and they still would say, what I was working with this school was different than what I worked with. The middle school was different than the high school, or this high school was different than this high school, because local problems arise in every school district. And to understand that school and what they really need from you, you have to understand what's going in that particular school as you start to work with them. So tailor your strategies. Don't try to make one size fit all. I'm not saying if it does fit, you can certainly try it there. But again, don't assume it's going to fit. It might have to shift a little bit. Okay. So why is school sector engagement important? This is sort of my last piece before I go on here. And again, there's a lot of this information in the brief. I just wanted to highlight. So again, it's central to youth engagement for many coalitions. School connectedness is strongly correlated with decreased use of substances. So again, there's multiple research out there. There's a strong evidence base that when youth in a community feel more connected to their schools, they're more likely to be doing well. Now, correlation is not causation, so there's always a big question about which comes first, but that's a key piece of it. And I would say the other underlying piece that you hear with this to some extent, and you'll see throughout the brief, is an adult who is supportive of youth and that youth can reach out to when they are struggling. So I always say, every day is a good day to make a positive difference in a life of a child, right? And when the youth know you're the person that they can come to when they're struggling, and then ideally again, as you take this maybe whole school approach, they know maybe I'm comfortable with the science teacher, and they've made it clear that they're open to me talking about these kinds of issues with them, not just about science. I'm good with the math teacher. I'm good with my coach. Who's the right person at my school that I can really connect with? There's also a very strong correlation between academic achievement and positive choices. So I mentioned earlier that some schools are very academics focused. So as you're hearing that they're concerned about this, then you can start talking about, well, you know, one of the things we know is when youth are making healthy decisions, they often do better in school. And again, you have to be careful here, honest here. It's correlational. It could be that kids who already are doing well in school are less likely to make bad choices, or it could be that the fact that you're not making those choices, that you're making positive choices, also helps you focus on other activities. And it's probably a little bit of both. And I did add in the help. This is the hot link that was also in the CDC training. I think it's a really good one to get that information on health and academics if you need some of that data to take to schools and kind of build that story with them to help them understand that. Okay. Just a couple other data points that we had in the report. So the school-related factors are something that many of you are talking about, either building on as a protective factor or working to address as a risk factor in your community. So about 62% report having a positive school climate as something they're building on. See, I'm behind already because that means I need to finish up here. So I won't go through all this data. I'm going to hit just a few key points and then I'm going to turn it over to Laura here in a second. Some of it is just so you know, the school sector engagement, if you've been reading the national evaluation points, the good news is they have been relatively active with DFC. They tend to rank right up there in active membership, right behind youth. They also tend to be among the highest in level of involvement. And for most part, that stayed true even during COVID, just so you know. See, I wasn't too far behind. So that gets me to Laura Morris at Be the Influence in Maine, and I'm going to turn it over to her.
Thank you, Barb. I appreciate that. It sounds like my echoing people. Okay, maybe I'm just echoing to myself and I'll have to get used to that. Thank you so much. Yeah, I am on the outskirts of Portland, Maine, and I just want to say it's an honor to be here because I know the DFCs across the nation are all doing fantastic things. We're just lucky enough to be able to share it. Now, how do I, okay, here we go. Keep going. We do lots with youth engagement. We've been very fortunate to be in a district that embraces it. So we have school-based groups at every school that we have, the middle and high schools. Education we get usually through the health classes, and we've done healthcare with the teacher retreats that has really helped them to bond. And so because of that, it's a great vehicle. We get almost everything through our health classes. We really believe in peer-to-peer facilitation on whatever the substances and trauma and just peer-to-peer talking. So we'll get into that in a little bit, but this Arts and Prevention series was particularly good during COVID when people were just looking for connection. And I'm going to get more into detail on that one as well. And advocacy with legislators, local government, there's nothing better than our youth voices. And we've been able to use them for talking at town hall meetings and on PSAs and media campaigns, testimonies. And then we're going to show you a couple of events where we really use youth voices. Sidekicks is kind of motivational interviewing, peer-to-peer, and we bring in other prevention agencies to teach our youth that so they know how to talk to their own youth in making healthy decisions. Each year we have about 25 kids that get trained on this main youth court, and that's basically kind of a referral program for when someone is caught with paraphernalia or anything like that. And it's just a nice peer reflection program. We decided we wanted our own youth summit at one point, and we put together a youth summit that we got about 120 kids to come to. They get their spiff all ready for the year. They learn all sorts of professional development, and it's a chance for them to network. And we usually do that with other DFCs. We'll talk about that in a little bit too. I know a lot of people do PSA contests, logo contests. We did sticker shock. We try to bring students to CADCA. And every community event we have, we want youth present as well. We're going to highlight the 7th grade opiate and vaping project because it has gotten some national attention, and it's something I think should be in every school. And we're working a lot on mentoring and refusal skills, particularly transitioning kids from middle school into high school. And so here's our little one of our middle school teams, some of our high school people. We have advisors per school, so that is the BTI advisor for the high school. This is just some of the things that we're doing in the classroom. This is called Family Sculpture, shows you what it's like to have substance misuse in your family, what kind of roles you can take on. But honestly, it's the health classes that have been our best vehicle. This was one way we changed physical design. This was a huge mural project, and so many kids, over 600, were able to participate in the whole district, because not everybody does sports. Not everybody is good at tons of things, but everybody can color. And so this kind of made its way around the city, and people really related to that. This is some of our peer-to-peer theater programs where 8th graders perform for elementary school, and we're also working with a high school group to do a suicide prevention theater program that will go down to the middle school group. That's just some of our peer-to-peer education that do it on vaping and marijuana and opiates, but they go down to the middle school, the high schoolers, to teach those kinds of classes. Whatever the interest, we try to do lots of youth engagement. This was Stay in the Game. It was a dodgeball tournament. That's the mascot for the Red Claws here in Maine. And this is just a picture from our youth summit. We did it with SOPO Unite, Westbrook Partners in Prevention, a couple other coalitions over the years. But honestly, the kids really got a lot of seeing other DFC youth groups together. This is a project we did with 7th graders, over 150 of them a year. And so through curriculum, again, they would learn about the dangers of vaping, what it does to the brain, how they're targeted through the media, that type of thing. And then we would bring them to the Capitol, and I'll show you a picture later, where they would educate our legislators on what they had learned. And it was really powerful. This is just the Escape the Vape room they did for an open house to all the parents that came in. This particular project we're going to highlight, it's called Taking Back Maine's Future, and we did bring it to the CADCA conference. But this particular project uses the Back to the Future theme, but it talks about what would Maine's future be like without the opiate crisis, and what would it be like with the opiate crisis. And so through school curriculum, and we'll get into that, I just want to show you this one. This is the kickoff assembly that our coalition basically puts together. The teachers came up with the project itself, but we kind of kick it off with bringing our director of opiate response in, and people from experts in prevention and law enforcement, and they kind of get the kids really excited about what they're going to engage in, that it's really kind of a big deal. And you can see in the English classes, they work on newspaper articles of a front page of, again, what would the future look like with, what would it look like without? And they were very creative, and the kids really embraced this. We did bring it to the Idea Fair at CADCA, and I'm going to show you that there is a blueprint that we can use if anybody's interested in this. I'll go back for just a second. So this was an open house night where you see the young boy with the front page of the newspaper. We also had PSAs there. The kids did science projects on how opiates affected the brain. And so we had like 120, 150 7th graders every year leaving 7th grade, going into 8th, knowing exactly what opiates were, why they have access to them, how kids tend to get addicted. And so they really felt strongly they wanted to talk about it. So Amanda Ruth, who's one of the creators, one of the teachers, has put together some roadmap basics. And I'm going to have Barbara share this website with you at some point in time, but there is a roadmap in there, as well as get to us at any time. We're more than happy to answer questions and talk to you. Again, connect with your curriculum areas, social studies, math, science, make it just a project-based learning, and make sure your administrative and school leadership is going to support it initially. These are some of the things that you wouldn't work so well unless you really have everybody on board. This did engage many sectors: youth, parents, community members, ourselves, substance misuse agencies. And the general outcome was a pre and post survey where they really increased knowledge. 150 kids affected each year, over 500 community members coming to the event itself. And we really feel like this is a very important project. The only challenges was time, because it is a commitment. And last year we couldn't do it because of COVID. We're doing it again this year. We do tons with parent engagement, with table talks, community events, newsletters, adult education, PTA, project graduation, athletic nights. We catch them where we can catch them because otherwise they don't come to the table. With athletes, we really believe in changing the code of ethics. We brought in John Underwood, who's a former Olympian coach, as well as works with the Navy SEALs. And he does a fantastic presentation on brain science that the kids really related to, no matter the substance, and just alternatives to use. And we're bringing in John Cross, who's also another athletic guru. And lastly, the first thing that our coalition did when we came was to start an ACEs task force about 4 years ago. No one even knew what ACEs meant. Now the whole district is trauma sensitive. And I really credit an assistant superintendent who came in and embraced the fact that we had started this. And we started with about 20 people from the school district. And now there's about 120 that she leads in a cell work group within the school district itself. We brought in the Maine Resilience Building Network to kind of train people on what ACE is, trauma sensitive, coping skills, resiliency is. We did a mental health summit, and we'll talk a little bit about that post-COVID. We did all sorts of training videos that were on the website so they would understand what this means. And we brought in mindfulness for the whole district, for staff and students. As well as curriculum, resiliency tools. This You Have the Power presentation was for high schoolers on overcoming adversity. Coalition members were trained on it as well. And now we're really moving into compassion mattering as two of the bigger concepts in terms of ACEs. We have a very restorative practice area, thank goodness. And so this just lends itself to it. And in November, we're going to bring Jacinta, which is a nationally acclaimed award-winning movie on overcoming resiliency about a young girl in Maine who is suffering and in recovery from heroin use. So we'll talk a little bit about that later as well. I feel like I had to go through that really quickly. And I'd like to turn it over to Des and Benj. Did I use my time, Barbara? Okay. I think I hit
All
stop.
right, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Des. Just one moment. I'm going to reshare the PowerPoint.
Okay, thank you, Laura and Barbara.
Okay, Des or Ben, you can go ahead and take
Okay.
control of the PowerPoint whenever you're ready.
Ben, you got that?
Yeah, can you see our slide?
Okay. Awesome. Awesome. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Problems become opportunities when the right people come together. And we're all coming together, and our coalitions are coming together, and we're having incredible impact. And I'm Des Martins, Vice President of Prevention at Mirror, and I've got with me our team members, Benjamin Meyer, Youth Leadership Program Manager, and Melissa Schreiber, Coalition Coordinator. I'm going to provide a brief history of our coalition, and then I'm going to turn it over to the rest of them. It all began with a town hall meeting. And, you know, I like to remember back to how people can come together and incredible things can happen just from one major event in a way. But that town hall meeting, we had youth share our 30-day substance use. And something that happened after that is people woke up and urgency was created. And so when they shared our 30-day use, everybody got like, what? This isn't looking good. We exposed what was going on. And shortly after that, a public-private partnership meeting met, and they asked us to come and share a little more about that. And at that meeting, our superintendent of schools in our largest district stood and said, "This scares me. The kids say 70% are using. Our coaches say we wouldn't have a football team if we did drug testing." At that same meeting, the business community said, "We can't find people to hire that can pass a drug test. at our manufacturing companies. And of course, law enforcement weighed in with saying pounds and pounds of marijuana are being delivered across from I-70. And so that day was a starting point, ignited a group of leaders to say, what can we do? And that's where we could say, we need to start a coalition. And they tapped people on the shoulder that day, and we began a coalition. That coalition was able to receive the Drug-Free Communities grant. I guess, first of all, I will share that that coalition came together and we began assessing our data, looking at qualitative and quantitative kinds of data. And one of the things that came forward is there was a high use of marijuana, especially in football teams all over our county. And that's something that people were wanting to address right away. And so when we began looking at programming that could help that, that's when we saw Life of an Athlete. And I heard Laura mention this too. So a work group formed at that time, and that work group stayed together for a year just in planning. And in that next year is when we received the Drug-Free Communities grant. But that work group started looking at our code of conduct and how it would need to be changed. The work group consisted of our AD and ADs from a few of our schools, athletic directors, community people, parents, social workers at school, and business people. Our chamber president was on there as well. And upon further investigation, what came out is that parents said, my kid had always gone out for football, but they decided not to, and I couldn't figure out why. And when they pressed their child, they said, there's too much pressure to use marijuana if you play football. So what had once been a protective factor in our community had become almost a risk factor in our county. So that was one of our things that we wanted to move forward with. I will say we're going to focus the presentation on how we've worked on a couple initiatives. Even though there are lots of things going on, we're going to focus on some of those school partnerships that have been key. So this group created the action plan, changed the code of conduct. The code of conduct went before the school board. Life of an Athlete is a program Melissa will share more about, but I have to tell you, don't get confused because we'll call it Life of a Railer. We are a railroad town. In fact, during this presentation, since it started, there have been 2 trains have gone through, and I'm hoping it doesn't happen for the rest of our presentation, but we're the railroaders. And so she'll refer to it as Life of a Railer. I want you to know what she's talking about. So the code of conduct change went before the school board and set clear standards. From the beginning, the decision was made, we don't want this just for athletes. We need this for all kids in any CASHA activity or sport. And so that was a decision made very early on with that initial team. So the code passed, and then we brought in trainings. John Underwood came, he trained our community and also our school. Melissa, take it away.
Okay, thank you, Des. So I'm Melissa Schreiber, the Coalition Coordinator for the Harvey County Drug-Free Youth. And I'll talk to you a little bit about Life of an Athlete. As we've heard, John Underwood was developed this program, Life of an Athlete. He was a former Olympic trainer, and this program has been adopted in many schools across the country. It focuses on a whole health approach, teaching the students about adequate sleep, nutrition, and abstinence from drugs and alcohol. Really giving the youth increased knowledge about how choices affect their bodies and their performance. So as Des mentioned, one of our schools, the largest school in our county, it was prevalent that there was a high use in that high school. So the team came together and worked to bring Life of an Athlete to the school. So they created the new code of conduct, which includes competence, citizenship, chemical health, character, and civility, with a restorative practice justice plan for when the code is violated. So one of the things they first did, the code of conduct in the beginning was only 2 or 3 pages long. So they went in, developed it based on those 5 components of Life of an Athlete, and it went to 11 pages. So we still have some work to do there, as some of the feedback we're getting is 11 pages might be really kind of too long for parents and students to really grasp what we're talking about here. So after it was implemented in COVID, we had a change in leadership at the superintendent level, at the school board level, and also at the high school level where Life of an Athlete was taking place. We were fortunate enough that we were able to work with them, and they reevaluated the code of conduct and really wanted to make what fits their school culture. One of the things that they did was create a creed by the students that included character, leadership, and accountability. And it really focused on relationship building and, like Des mentioned, to include all the state high school activities, not just the athletes, but also the elective activities like band, choir, debate, cheer, and so on. And then another thing that they did was preseason meetings for parents and students. This involved the parents and the students coming and listening to the athletic director talk about the impact of alcohol and other substances and what it means to be a leader in that school. Parents were required to attend and participate in the presentation, and to also cite of the code of conduct, that they understood the code of conduct and implications if it was not followed. Another piece that was added was training of coaches. So there's a training each year for the coaches so that they can better understand and promote positive lifestyle choices. This high school was able to include these required trainings in the supplemental contracts of the coaches. So by including that in their contracts, it allowed for higher participation rates for those coaches meetings. And also the athletic director also, put together a kind of a makeup if for some reason they were not to attend. So that was a huge piece in getting that as part of their supplemental contract. Another big piece was they were able to establish a youth leadership team called SALT. Student Activities Leadership Team is what SALT stands for. The students are selected by coaches and directors to help improve performance and promote healthy lifestyle choices among their peers and hold them accountable. They have monthly meetings discussing the Rayler Way, which is what they now call Life of an Athlete. And they focus on relationship, leadership, and accountability skills. Currently, they're working on training to go into one of the elementary schools and do some mentoring with the elementary schools and kind of tie those leaders at the high school to the elementary schools, to the little kids, so that they can look up to them. Also, another thing that has been new this year is that they are inviting community members into their monthly discussions about building relationship, leadership skills, and accountability. So that's really cool that the principal has brought that in. Another piece is stakeholder unity. This is going to create positive social norms with key messages to support the community in reducing underage drinking and substance use. We've been able to do that with the help of our community members by placing marquee messages at banks and other businesses with their digital marquees. We've also have some high schools reading some public service announcements at their school events, football games, and they're going to continue that on into basketball and softball and baseball this year. The chamber newsletter, our local chamber allows us to put a piece in their newsletter with updates of what the coalition has been doing and what's going on, and some other messages around town. So I just want to, the big point here is that the work with the school is really based on relationship building and supporting those schools however we can. We check on them on a regular basis. We meet them quarterly regarding the Life of an Athlete, or now it's called Rayler Way, and develop an action plan to keep that going. And we were able to do all this even with the changes at the school district. Like I said, we had a leadership change at the building level, the superintendent level, the Board of Education level. And so we just continue to build on relationship building. And now the principal is sharing the work that they're doing, the positive culture changes that they're doing in their school at the local civic groups that he belongs to. So really, the key for us is just that relationship building and being a support for the school as much as we can. And then I think, Des, we'll turn it back over to you for some more on...
Thank you, Melissa. Just a really quick final thing to the drug policy. This is a recent development, but when the coalition first started, people were very concerned and said, we want something for those kids that are already using substances. Well, with our Drug-Free Communities grant and just beginning, we could not address that right now because we were all about primary prevention. But just this last school year, we found out one of our coalition members is Community Corrections Director. We found out about a grant that we could use to add Teen Intervene. And so now that we have a stricter policy, more kids are getting caught with the code of conduct and the general drug policy changes in the school. And so now we have an intervention. We can say, okay, instead of being suspended this many days, you can go for this through Teen Intervene, 3 sessions, and help you get on the right track, set new goals, and give them that opportunity. That's just a recent development we couldn't help but share because it's such a positive thing. Benjamin.
All right, everybody, what's up? My name is Benjamin Meyer. I'm the Youth Leadership Program Manager at MIR, and I get to talk about my favorite thing in the world, STAND, and I've got like 3 minutes to do it, so I'm gonna go super fast. STAND is MIR's youth development and leadership program in the high schools that we work in. It's an evidence-informed program that's based on building protection and for youth. There's 6 different school districts that we work with currently. There are clubs located in those high schools. Those clubs are led by adults in the schools, ranging from like an art teacher all the way to a principal. We currently have, I guess I should advance the slide. We currently have 120 students, over 120 students from total over the 6 districts working on preventing substance use and boosting mental health. Excuse me. So this is sort of the structure. These are the 6 teams that we have, as well as a county board. This is a picture of one of the club meetings, what it would look like. So if you guys are all DFC grants, you probably understand this as far as working with grants. So especially working with kids, you want to make things as youth-led as possible, giving them creativity, but you have a list of things you have to include and a bunch of boxes to check. I'm not going to go super into detail because I don't have time, but basically the way we make things youth-led is we ask strategic open-ended questions. They can be sort of focused on your check boxes to help identify needs in the school. The kids are pretty good about identifying needs. What I found though is that they aren't as familiar, they're good at critical thinking, they aren't as familiar with creative problem solving, so helping them come up with creative solutions to those needs can be a little bit of a challenge, but once they get into that mindset, it becomes a natural thing for them. And that then leads to youth-led initiatives. They have a lot more buy-in when it's their idea. They have a lot more willingness to contribute as well. So then you ask more open-ended questions, so it kind of becomes a cycle there. So some of our partnerships with schools are each one of our teams, each one of the white circles there are the towns that we have. Each one of our teams does a middle school presentation. This is a picture of one of our middle school presentations. They do at least one every year. This one happened to be Who Wants to Be a Millionaire focused. We also have Family Feud. We did a TikTok themed presentation on alcohol and mental health this last year. So basically they go into the middle schools, every single middle school in our county, in their town, and they go and speak to the middle schoolers. So we hit at least all the 8th graders, if not 7th graders, depending on the size of the school. We also do a lot of alternative activities. We call them 5th quarters here. Each of our towns has a different name for them though. This is a big 5th quarter that we did. We partnered with the YMCA as well as the Youth Ministry Network, like the faith community here. And they put on this 5th quarter. There were actually 7 different school districts, 3 outside of the ones that we work with, I think, represented here. Kids drove like 35 minutes to get to there, which was pretty great. And then we have a small group of our members that share a positive message, whether that's a prevention message or just mental health message at that point to those kids. We also do a lot of youth identified activities. So this is some examples of our vaping information. There were kids that said there's a lot of vaping going on in our school, we need to address that. So we partnered with them and created some cool messages. We ripped off these logos. I don't know how legal that is, but it's fine. So we created those and then we put on the back a text line for them in case there were kids that needed help. We partnered with the FACS class, so they baked muffins, and then we handed out these to everybody that came in the school, as well as breakfast, and then we printed a whole bunch more so that all of the rest of our schools could use them. Let's see. They also represent their school on our larger level, so it goes outside of the walls of the school. A lot of what we do is actually outside of the walls. So this is some of our kids representing their schools and their communities at the legislative session at the Capitol building for our state. They've also been able to go to national trainings, and they're representing not only their school but their community. We also do community service and a lot of stuff that gets outside of the walls as well. All right, that was really quick. I'm going to pass it off to Barb.
Great, thank you. Great job. In case it wasn't really clear from both those presentations, although I think it was, and one of the things you'll see in the brief is that school engagement with schools can happen across the 7 strategies for change, right? You heard all kinds of ways to engage with schools. It starts sometimes with information and ends up all the way up to policy change, right? So both individual level change, community level change, those are all happening in with our schools. So I really wanted to make sure I echoed that. I know I didn't push it in my part of the presentation, but it is presented that way in the brief as well, if that's helpful to people. So we're going to talk a little bit about COVID-19. COVID-19 has been a challenge, and it probably has shown up, you know, it's everywhere. So I don't want to say no more worse, but schools were definitely a challenge, right? Schools shut down. You know, literally people felt like their access to youth in the community was shut down, a lot of DFCs. And some of you I know still feel like you're struggling with that. And of course, COVID is still going on. And there's also been this echo of repercussions that I think DFCs are also experiencing with schools. Now, you know, some school boards feel under attack about vaccine issues and everything else, and parents, and what is everybody's perspective, and appreciating that, again, you can be the person in the community that can hopefully help with some of those challenges. And how can you help them, I think, is sort of the key here, you know, and recognizing that you understand they have a problem, right? I can't imagine anybody on this call doesn't know that there's some of those challenges going on in there, and hopefully knows in their community the extent to which they're going on. And if you can help with that, that's something to try to build on, right? How can we play helpful here instead of, you have to help me get data because I have to do core measures for my coalition or whatever. And again, I want core measure data, don't get me wrong, but we recognize these challenges are out there. So it's been a problem, and it was a problem even for these coalitions that were successful that we talked to. And just so you know, I forgot to put it on the slide deck, and apologies because I did not look it up while they were talking, but if memory serves, BTI was in year 5 when we interviewed them and just got awarded a year 6 this year or last year. So they're currently a year 6. I always get confused about timeline. And then I believe Stand was a year 2 and they're now a year 3, right? I think even from your timeline, that's what I'm seeing as well. So they're a sort of younger coalition, as it were, who really hit the ground running. And in fact, their foundation was coming from this buildup from the school that Laura talked about. So again, it's that people come at it from all kinds of different ways. I think that's part of what's exciting, that it really is going to have to be something you develop locally, but you got to do the work. So again, not surprisingly, a lot of what happened was people turned to presenting virtually during COVID. There was a lot of work on youth training, and some people actually felt that they were even able to do more youth training and participating in sort of what adults call professional development because of COVID, because things like CADCA got more affordable. They didn't have to send them to CADCA, so they didn't have travel costs. They just had registration costs, and some of those were even lower. Something to even maybe follow up with CADCon if you're feeling like you can't send as many youth, and when they go back to in-person, there's pros and cons of both approaches, right? Partnering with school districts to provide online support groups for students and parents. Again, as you listen to these coalitions talk and what we were talking about, school connectedness is so important, and kids started to feel disconnected from schools in some cases. during COVID. That's one of the, I think I just read a study on that just this past week where they're finally starting to pull that data, right? And one of the things people did see was kind of a disconnect. But again, I think one of the roles DFCs can play is helping find ways to keep kids connected to their schools, to their communities, to their families, help parents stay connected to the schools by providing these both supports to students, some trainings, just, you know, all kinds of things were happening. They also use it as an opportunity to do some of that training with school personnel. That was helpful. You know, we were talking about, you know, trauma happening at a COVID level. Well, guess what? We're the experts on this. Let me talk with you a little bit about that if you do feel like you're able to do that, or find the right person who can talk to the schools about that. And finally, some people, again, some of those virtual coalition meetings actually increased participation from school district personnel in particular, because they didn't have to worry again about travel time and getting there in person. They were able to just join. And I know some coalitions have talked about either continuing to have some meetings totally online or letting people join in person or online, depending on what's going on, that's maybe a positive outcome from that. So I'm going to turn it right back over to Des and her team to talk about some of their specifics about addressing COVID. And then we'll go from there over to Laura again.
Awesome. I can talk again. Woohoo. So unfortunately, COVID happened. I put this picture in the background of our slide, and there's a little bit of a story with it. Basically, our team got really tired of COVID, all of our conversations sort of digressing into COVID, and COVID being a barrier, COVID being a boundary, COVID being the end of everything that we were saying. So we created this jar in our office, and we put it, and every time somebody said that C word, unfortunately, Barb, you owe us $15. You had to put $1 in the jar. And then once we got enough money, we were able to go to coffee as a team. It's a fun story, but it's really more about enhancing our reach and our presence in our community. So it was less about COVID being a barrier and more about how can we overcome this, how can we be better than this, and how can this make us better. So there are some words that came to mind when we were talking about our coalition and stand and like the pandemic. So the first one I say was flexibility. This is a really good picture of that. This is a picture of our board meeting, our youth board meeting with Stand. We had to partner with the church. We spaced kids out 6 feet. We used all of the local recommendations. We weren't able to have a group picture, so thank you to my professional editing skills for being able to Photoshop a group picture together with the kids. But I think this illustrates a lot of us being flexible. The coalition obviously transitioned to online meetings, and they became a lot about supporting those members and those partners that we had. Our back to school days could be outside. They can be outside at tables. It's not as fun, but it can be outside at tables to be healthier. We can do Halloween bags with positive messages put on cars in parking lots because we can't hand things to kids. So it was a lot about like being flexible. How can we get this done? How can we do what we want to in a safe way? We were also, support was another word that sort of came up. This was a really, really fun picture and kind of touches me every time I see it. Before school started, we got our kids together and we said, okay, this year's gonna be way different. You're gonna have all these stipulations. You have to take your temperature, wear your mask, all of this stuff. How can we be a part of making something fun or making it normal or whatever? And one of the kids looked at me and she said, why are we focusing so much on us? The teachers are gonna struggle just as much as we are. And so from that conversation, the kids decided to make these, those are, well, not very good, but they're railroad tracks on the cards because we're the railers. And they spent 32 hours and wrote 178 individualized notes to every single staff person at their high school, from custodian all the way up to principal. So that was such a cool project, came from kids, and they had a great time doing it. We also filled a lot of needs. This is a picture of that. The Stand kids reached out to the hospital and said, at the beginning of the pandemic, and said, what do you need? And they were like, we have a shortage of everything, basically. But they said surgical caps were something that they needed. And so one freshman girl who was really passionate about sewing, she coordinated kids from 3 different towns via Zoom and sewed 80 surgical caps for our hospital. And we bought all of the materials from local businesses, so it boosted the local economy as well. And then those boys or kids that didn't know how to sew or wanted to help wrote positive notes and attached a positive note to every single one. And then they donated them. This is actually a picture of doctors. We were told by the hospital that they were fighting over them, and that they were so excited to have personalized caps, and also fill a need. We also just became, Stand and the coalition became a source of positivity because we were so focused on let's not let COVID be a part of the conversation anymore. Let's work our way around it. The kids took that to do sidewalk chalk outside on the first day of school. There were actually 2 first days of school because they had to split the student population in half. So sidewalk chalk stayed for both days. They just had some footprints on it, but they did positive messages outside the school. The coalition worked on spreading positivity as well. Lots of the different partners did that. We were kind of a bright spot in our community. And then student mental health. Working with the kids, I think that I had a front row seat to seeing their eyes above their mask and what the pandemic was doing with them. We got feedback from the kids, no one is happy, everything's canceled, what do we have to look forward to, what's the point? I could tell over their masks in our meetings that their eyes just looked sad, tired, overwhelmed, like any emotion, you name it. So what I did, this is actually, it's not a very good picture because it was dark. If you guys know what Among Us is, you'll understand this. If you don't, the trend is over and I'm not going to explain it. But we created an in-person Among Us game for our meeting where we normally have an agenda and like things to do. I was like, if Stand can be the one positive thing that they have to look forward to right now, let's do it. So we did that, and I got texts from the kids saying that was the most fun that I've had in a long time. And if we can be that for those kids, then that's what I'm here for. This is just a filler picture because I don't have a picture of this story, but our Sedgwick team was the one that said no one's happy, everything's canceled, nothing to look forward to, all of that stuff. And this is about dad jokes. Their solution to that was to create dad jokes, a huge list of dad jokes, and then have them announced on the PA system at school. Not only that, but in between passing periods, they wanted to have music in the passing periods and in the common area. So they did that, and it was just those little small things. I had basically asked them, well, how can we be a part of doing something positive? Like, if everything's canceled, what can we do? Like, it was never, oh, shoot, we can't do anything. Like, are you guys okay? It was, what can we do to get something done? What can we do to help with this? So a week into that, our sponsor, who is not like super talkative, doesn't text me a lot. She texted me and she's like, you have no idea how much those 2 little things have changed the culture of our school. So all that to say, my encouragement is to not let the pandemic or your action plan hold you back. It's hard to be flexible, but it's definitely worth it in the end. And don't forget to listen to what the kids are saying. Just like other partners, we need to remember to compromise with them. If they're passionate about something, help them do it. It's probably twice as rewarding for you as it is for them. So with that, I'll pass it over to, yeah, absolutely, Robin, let's do it. I'll pass it over to Laura.
Okay, well, that's fantastic, Ben. I love everything that you're doing, and very similar to what you were talking about. Is mine gonna come on in a second here? I think. Oh, I said just have to go forward a couple. Okay, yeah. So we had the same thing. We went from a district where you could get in and there were hundreds of kids to do tons of things, and all of a sudden it was like the doors were closed on us and we could not penetrate it, even though the district was into it. They just couldn't do it. And in the meantime, we're seeing an upscale in substance misuse and self-medicating and anxiety and depression. So we did a survey to parents, schools, youth, community, and we said, what can we do to help? We're trying to help. What can we do? And we had to think out of the box, and that's what you saw Ben do a lot of. You have to be creative, and you have to hit them where they're engaged and entertained. And so we tried this Empower Me series, and it was online, and every month it would have a different webinar. And I will say this was a challenge because online was not hitting it. They wanted connection, personal connection. So I'm going to say that was a good idea and concept, but we had to get down and out and dirty with everybody. So we started a program called Family Fun Fitness and Film Festival. It was just all about fun. And our Day of Abundant Hope, which is when religious leaders talk from the pulpit on recovery and hope and resiliency and what we can do in our communities. But this was our first year, and you can see it was kind of cold in Maine. It was in October, and we had mindfulness in the woods. We had yoga on the beach. We had resources from everywhere. We had Narcan demos. We played Princess Bride when the lights went down, and food and interactive games and scavenger hunts and that kind of thing. And the point was, kids just said, we feel isolated. We need connection. Everything from our survey said mental health, mental health, mental health. And so we just wanted to connect them in ways that were fun, without any message, without anything else. I will say on this first year, because it was so cold, we had 32 to 40 people come. But our second one, which we've just done now that COVID's opened up a little bit, we had 140. And so there you can see yoga on the beach again. And feedback was really, really good. We're going to build on this particular thing, but people just need connection. And yet we were giving away swag bags with tons of resources in them as well. I can't speak enough about how the arts really reach people right now, particularly youth. And it's worked well with us in this arts and prevention series. We're seeing dramatic behavior changes. So again, we did a little bit of chalk art, but we started with art prevention program where we talked about Van Gogh and how people deal with trauma, and when they're beaten down, how they express themselves, and how he used to express himself through his art. And we kind of taught them how he did it with colors and form and subject line. And then they took those and transferred them onto the chalk art. I love Ben's idea of doing it, just positive messages all over the school. We went even a step further in terms of connection. So this guy you see on the bottom, his name is Glenn, and he's basically over 9 years in recovery. So he adopted this puzzle project where he took people in recovery and they did art on puzzle pieces, and he connected them all together, and then he'd take them around the state and show people what it's like to feel connected, so that people in recovery could feel that. Well, we commissioned him in to do the same project, but instead of recovery, we based it on resiliency and hope. And so kids would just do whatever artwork you can see here, mainly collaging. And what we're going to do when the puzzle is completely done is it will hang in the high school, and we'll have a panel discussion and an open night where we can have the whole community and talk about the project. There'll be hundreds of kids who will have participated at this point. We did it at Jordan Small Middle School retreat just recently. That girl in the middle, she comes from a family where both of her parents overdosed in 1 year. So this was really wonderful. Not only did they do their puzzle pieces and we talked about connection, but we did journaling with it and had some really deep discussions about what do we do when we're beaten down. We brought in a dance program that DEA 360 subsidized for us. I will say we only had about 10 kids in the program. It was completely online, but the kids that were in it, the parents said this was life-changing for them. They were just desolate, home, depressed, anxious. And it was the one thing they look forward to every week. I loved this program, middle school monologues. We do a lot of theater to build self-esteem. And this was 13 kids. Once again, one kid had a father who overdosed. 2 were dealing with divorce. The rest of them were just beaten down by the isolation that they had experienced. And when they came in to this 4-day theater week, they were depressed. They were scared. They were insecure. They didn't feel like they had friends. They were acting up a little bit. By the time we finished 4 days worth of writing down monologues on what brings you joy, what brings you hope, and on top of what did you do to cope with that? And then improvisational games and that type of thing. These kids, these monologues were fantastic. You would think it was like a Broadway show. And they came out of it with this support system of these kids, but also just feeling so good about themselves. And I had parents coming up to me going what did you do to our kids in these last 4 days? We don't understand. You've transformed them. And so I cannot stress enough how much theater really helps with that. Now, will I be able to play this, Barb? I guess I'll give it a shot.
Yep. It should work.
Right. We also did a lot of PSAs because at least they could do that from home. And this was one we did for Sea Dogs is our local baseball AAA team. And we got to play this at halftime
It's time to play Would You Try Me?
I'm Wayne Truesdale of the game show Would You Try Me? Substance number 1.
Hey y'all, they call me opiates, and I'm made from the poppy plant. I'm not natural though. You may use it to reduce pain or stress.
Hey, Laura, you need to unmute yourself. We heard the videos, but you need to unmute you.
Okay. Yeah, that we used really so kids can understand what ACEs are without saying ACEs, understanding that those are the types of things that can hit you, and yet what can you do to cope? And we're using that for an alcohol awareness campaign coming up. We also were able to partner with the Flavors of Fame campaign. Usually we took kids to the Capitol, like hundreds of them, to talk to legislators. And we couldn't do that this year. So we were able to do it by just having testimonies come in all the time through Zoom and talking to legislators on this Flavors Hooks Kids. Sadly, they still didn't vote against the 15,000 flavors that are in vaping products, but whatever. This mental health summit, 2 days long, we just finished last week actually, and it was a professional development day. We had experts on trauma and stigma and LGBTQ and positive youth and adult support. You name it, we had it in there. And we just wanted to give people ways to cope. And so the first day we had about 45, the second day we had 297, but the feedback has been fantastic that it came at a time where not only youth, but staff really needed this. We started a mental health club within the high school, and it's focusing on youth food insecurity, homelessness, partnering with NAMI, and we're going to do a lot with suicide prevention this year. If you're not aware of Johnny's Ambassadors, there are people, young youth who are using dabbing marijuana and committing suicide, and this is the group of testimonies and the mother who put it together. So I highly suggest you looking into that. Locally, we have the Yellow Tulip Project, which is also suicide prevention and putting in tulips every year. And we're going to be doing a peer-to-peer theater program called Make It to Tomorrow, where high schoolers will present to the middle school. So we feel like suicide is really part of getting at the seeds at the bottom, which leads to all these scary things. So Jacinta, again, we told you about that screening, is coming up November 4th. And this, again, is just to build resiliency skills. And we have a panel of experts. We have Jacinta herself, the director of the movie, statewide experts, and we just really hope, Narcan demos, we hope to have as many people there as possible. We seem to have 100 already registered. So this is how we're just trying to keep people connected, like humanly connected, not just online. And it's the best we can do with what we've got, but so far so good. That's us. And if anybody has any questions, I'm more than happy to talk with anyone or send information at any time on any of these ideas. I will pass it back to Barbara.
Thank you. Thanks everybody so far. Oops. While I'm betting Kathleen's going to pull the slides back up for me. One follow-up I was going to say as we transition to questions is that you know, one of the things, the purpose here was not our work on youth coalitions, but I will tell you one of the things we've heard sometimes from youth coalitions about youth coalitions in DFC is that it is one of the places that many kids feel welcomed. And maybe one of the only places is, you know, when they're nude from community. You don't have to be good at a sport to join a DFC. You don't have to be smart. You don't have to be right. And usually you've got people in there who are understanding about mental health challenges or working to help kids with those issues. So it really is sort of an environment where kids can feel welcomed. And if that's not happening, that might be something you want to visit in your coalition as well. Got off on a short tangent there. The other thing before I turn to the questions that I wanted to mention was that the slides will be available. We'll be sending out the recording as a follow-up and the slides, and they'll all get posted on the Learning Center out on DFC Me. And we'll share those links with you in a follow-up e-blast. So watch for that e-blast and you'll get everything. And you did see in here the presenters today all kindly shared their contact information. So if we don't get anything answered, you can follow up with them directly and see what they do. Don't overwhelm them. But I also would like to mention that I did make sure they had media releases for their pictures on here. So again, anytime if you ever are helping us out, make sure you have that before you share pictures of youth with me. It's a good reminder for me as well. All right, let me go ahead and start with the questions. And I can't remember if somebody was going to help me with those or if I should just start looking at the questions. I'm easily. Yes.
It's Erica. I will be reading questions for you.
Thank you.
So the first question we have, does the code of conduct address sports culture beyond drug and alcohol use?
Yes. Melissa, I don't know if you have more to say about that, but it goes into a lot of character kinds of building and traits.
Yeah, and they added a piece. I saw the question online about the topic. We had a situation here where some things were being investigated by the local police, and so they have gone in the code of conduct and added that if there is a police investigation of anything that happens outside of the school, that determinations as far as the code of conduct goes will not be made until those proceedings have taken place.
Great, thank you. The next question is, how are you able to get the students approved to leave school in order to do presentations at other schools?
I'm not sure who that's for, but we've done that a lot. And usually it's your school district just has to understand the importance of this experience for these youth. Going to another school is an education in itself. And so usually they'll allow them to be excused from their class time and use buses to get over. And I'm sorry, go ahead, Ben.
No, you're good. I mean, yeah, that's absolutely true. We, especially in Newton, we have our biggest school. It takes a day to speak to all the classrooms that we do. So kids get out of school for a day. Because our clubs function within the school, it's a little bit easier, but it's all about relationships with those administrators, with the people at the front desk even. So having those relationships, talking about what they're doing, having those administrators as a part of the coalition, bought into the mission, is totally cannot be understated how beneficial that is.
Great, thank you. The next question we have is mental health advocacy / mental health activities covered under DFC grant funding?
Yes, basically it is. And Barbara, you can correct me as much as you need to. I know when we first came in and we wanted to do so much with ACEs and resiliency, and yet it really, I don't even think DFC was doing tons with it. But I've seen many of things come through that now they say, as long as you're starting with anything that helps with coping, which we know directly relates to substance misuse, rather than self-medicating, we're allowed to use funds, but of course it has to be under the criteria of how you use funds. So education is okay, that type of thing.
This is one of those bottom line, the place I would, well, the only thing I would add is this might be a good place to defer to your project officer. And it's a great way to have a conversation with your project officer and make sure that what you're planning, well, how it's aligned to your action plan and that they are okay with it, that they do consider it an allowable use of funds. That keeps me out of trouble as well as keeping you out of trouble if I don't make a blanket statement. There's some things that are pretty clearly not allowable, but I agree with Laura. I think, yes, there's a wide range of this that is allowable. There might be something that maybe not so much. So again, follow up with your project officer just to confirm. They love to talk to you, so they'll appreciate you reaching out in that direction.
Yeah, if I can speak, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Melissa. Oh, I was just going to say, if I can speak out of the side of my mouth, maybe stop the recording for just a second. No, I think that they're co-occurring. I mean, they go together. So if I can say, be creative with applying it to your action plan, and then you can add in mental health for sure. That's a lot of what we do is it covers a lot of our events, cover all of everything. And so being creative in how you put it in there. You can report on the substance use part if you want to. And then a lot of it is mental health too, because there's things that you can do that hit both of those things. I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and I was just going to say a shout out to those project officers. You know, anytime that we've had a question about a particular event or something that we're wanting to do. Our project officer has been great in helping us figure out what direction to go with that. So shout out to those project officers.
And a shout out to CADCA. At the last, would have been mid-year, they had one of the sessions on kind of that crosswalk with mental health and SUD, and then how to do a logic model that included both. It was excellent. I have the notes, and it was been very helpful in this regard.
And to Des's point, I mean, if you go to the CADCA leadership conferences, you'll see there's tons of breakouts on ACEs, trauma-informed, building from the roots up, using the arts, being creative. And so I think that's another corroboration.
Great, thank you. We don't have any other questions at this time, but feel free to send us your questions in the chat.
I might do a little follow-up. I might start with Laura here while we're waiting to see if anybody else has questions too. I do think the hardest thing for any coalition, I will just share this as an evaluator, is to eat the story out of them, right? That's your job as an evaluator sometimes, is to how did that happen, right? And I do think one of the reasons we chose to highlight the event on Take Back the Future was sort of an innovation strategy, right? Which is always one of those interesting things, because I do think over time, one of the challenges is to maybe introduce innovation, but then start to decide what's some evidence, why should I keep doing this? But I do think one of the things that, again, was really key about that, that's really hard to put your finger on, is that, again, a wide range of teachers was involved with that. A lot of times you hear like the teachers, the health teachers at the school are getting involved with your coalition and stuff. And, you know, sometimes the coaches, I think that's a common one as well. So again, athletics has started to help find that overlap. But again, in that particular event, they got science teachers, English teachers, math teachers, all on board to say, here's what's going in our classes now anyway. So if we're going to teach graphing, we're going to teach graphing around what happens with substance use. That we're all in this together, I think. But again, I don't know if Laura wants to share anything a little bit about how that happens. And I know it's hard to put a finger on, and it's different for every teacher probably.
I have to say, and I say, I walked into a district that had, like, that school district is just engaged. So there's that. So I know there are districts that it's a little bit more difficult, but if you go to any of the pillars in most school districts, they have to do some project-based learning. And so how do you do project-based learning, particularly on substance misuse, when they have to do reading and writing and arithmetic and all of that? But if you take substance misuse and that happens to be the topic of English, and you're going to write and learn how to, then you're doing both at the same time. And so they were able to wean it in very easily. And that's all you have to say. We're not taking away from the other pillars that you're trying to achieve. We're just putting substance misuse also in, and you can do it at the same time. So, you know, like the video club did the PSAs, and the English did the writing, and the science did the science projects on how it works on the brain. And so they all relate, and they're still achieving both their pillars. And so that's one good way to talk to the school. But most of the time, they're pretty motivated when they know the outcome for the youth.
Great, thank you. I don't know if anybody else wants to add anything to that, but I appreciate hearing that. If no one else does, I appreciate that, sharing that piece. And
I was just going to share, I think something to keep in mind in the big picture is it's always about 2 steps forward, 1 step back, at least if you're like us. And so learning, and I shared this with the chamber just last week when I had a little report, the flywheel effect. I love that analogy, that we're working to change things, but it's not a single event and it's not one killer moment, but it's a process of relentlessly pushing forward in many different ways, the ways that seem right to your community, the ways that you have that capacity, and turn upon turn upon turn, and one moment you realize you've built momentum and you have a breakthrough. But you're always looking for another breakthrough, you know, but it's never, I don't want this to sound easy. Like some of the things we've done, we got discouraged, but we didn't go away. We didn't give up. We kept moving forward. And with doing that, I think all of us as coalition people experience those breakthroughs, but they don't come without blood, sweat, and tears sometimes, and a lot of work.
Absolutely. I saw one question that said, when do we start recruiting and how do we retain them? And we have a clubs fair. So at the high school, basically I get an advisor per school, and that's the best way to recruit because you have someone right in there. And then we have the students from the year before, they then recruit, but we get a whole plan in place. In terms of being at the clubs fair, but then a media campaign within the school, but then also bring one person to the meeting type thing. And then once you do get everybody collectively together, we've had far better success with project-based things so that they don't go in going, oh my gosh, I don't really want to commit to all this stuff. Or I like that project, but I don't really like that project. And as we find out what they're really interested in, then we make it project-based. Oh, you love to present, so you can do the peer-to-peer this, and you can do the theater stuff, and you can do and that way they tend to stay focused and involved because it's not as overwhelming and it doesn't compete with sports and everything else, choir, whatever else they might be doing.
I would say if you're just starting out with youth work, the best way to do it, if you're going to have a club in the school or however it's going to look, you have to find those people that have relationships with the kids. You're not going to get any kids involved without relationships. You have to tap them on the shoulder. Some kids don't know that they have a strength inside of them until you point it out. So you have to point at them and say, you would be amazing at this, and I want you to be a part of this. So I think if you're starting out with absolutely nothing, that would be a really good way, finding a way to make relationships with the kids, finding a way to get into the school. You can start recruiting yourself. What we tend to do is all of our kids from our programs, I do call them kids, sorry. They don't mind, I've asked them. All of our kids man the recruitment booths. We've had our kids create on their own a whole script and everything about what STAND is. In their words. I was a little bit involved with the script, just like, maybe don't say it like that, but definitely let them take the reins. What's the best, even at the beginning of the year, I'm like, what's the best way to get more kids involved? They know when their freshman days are, they know where kids are going to be, they know what's going to be most effective. If you don't want to have a booth with 15 other club booths, figure out a way to have one without. And we've had kids create the script. That's what I started to say, create a script and create a video all by themselves separately during COVID in their bedrooms or outside at their house or whatever. And they sent all the clips together. They made a really cool video all by themselves, which was amazing too. So really just ask them. It might be a little challenging at first, but I think they have really creative ideas once they get rolling.
I think that finding the right adult leader is a real key to getting off the ground. I think that you really hit it with that, Benjamin. That is one of the really, again, back when we were doing some work on youth coalitions. And again, it's a hard thing to put a finger on sometimes, right? Like, you know it when you see it, or the kids tell you that's who they talk to, and that it's a good thing, right? Not a, what's really going on here thing. And I think it really is key. I tell people all the time, I don't think I would be the right person to run a youth coalition. I don't think it is my wheel. You know, you put me with 2-year-olds, I'm amazing. You put me with 13-year-olds and I'm like, what's going on? What are they doing? And I've watched people who are just like calm as can be and know when to rein them in and when to let them go for a minute. And then again, you have to be somebody. I think with the really strong youth coalitions, eventually they're kind of like Benjamin was talking about, turning over the leadership to them. And again, you have to be the kind of adult who gets comfortable with that. And some adults really just aren't as comfortable with that, you know, they feel like they're supposed to be there and I'm the voice of authority here or whatever. And I think really they become their own voice, and that's what really good, strong youth coalitions do. And so I just wanted to echo that, what Benjamin was saying.
Yeah, middle school kids are easier than you think. They just want to be noticed. They just want to be noticed. Hey, Katie asked me, how did you get teachers to attend the mental health summit? And Katie, that's a really good question, because most of the success we've had is we go to something that people have to be at anyway. If you're waiting for them to like have amazing amounts of interest and come to your mental health summit, probably not going to happen. So this was a professional development day. And then same thing with like, if we want to get to parents, we go to the athletic nights and we present there, because otherwise it's really hard to get them to the table. But that's a good point. Have it at a time when they have to be there anyhow.
I would also say if you do already have something where people are coming to, build off of that in general. I know, Red Ribbon Week, we know now a lot of them are very ineffective, right? And I think some coalitions hear that and hear that it's not a good evidence-based practice, so we're not supposed to do it, and then they cut it out. And then they're like, well, we used to get, hundreds of parents to show up for whatever at Red Ribbon Week. So I always remind people, don't throw things away necessarily before you figured out how to jump off from it and move it in a new, better, different direction. Just to build on again what Laura was saying, I think that's a real key piece of it. And don't hear me saying, again, you're supposed to be using evidence-based practices. That is what you're supposed to be doing. But again, I think there's a piece of that to understand where's your community at, so that you build from it, is important.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, every community is different and the needs are going to be different, and the activities that communities do are going to be different in each town. So, Des always says local communities solving local conditions, and that's really, going to be a key piece in all of this if you're just getting started.
I will say back and forth too with like how kids like to be treated or what they like to be called. In our area, youth, they don't mind at all. But I mean, it's really true. Like every area is different in what floats their boat. So I'm sorry that they don't like to be called youth. We don't have a problem in our area.
But
that's okay. I end up calling them kids anyway. Along with some of the chat or some of the what's going on in the chat about food. Yeah, absolutely. Food helps for sure. What I found out this year though is kids aren't eating. Like we usually have a whole meal, and we've cut down to just snacks because kids weren't eating the food. Like the food wasn't the draw anymore. And I think what's really cool is they come for the relationships, they come for the connections with each other, and they come for the work. I think food is really good to get them in the door. Food is really good to get them engaged at the meeting. It helps for sure, even just having it now still. But oh yeah, and parents love food too. Everybody loves food. Who doesn't love food? But yeah, I think it's really cool that I'm realizing this year, like I was kind of upset at first. I was like, come on guys, we ordered this pizza, or like we made this food, but they're there for the work, which is really exciting and really cool for me.
And which is really good because we can't pay for food with DFC funds, so we always have to go elsewhere.
It's true, unless you can afford $3 per person or something like that, I think is the rule.
Could use some match funds. How are we doing, Erica? They're doing a great job reading the chat. They're better than I am at doing it, which is nice. I'm always all over it. I know we're out of time here today, so I should probably respect everybody's time, including my presenters here, who did such an amazing job. I do hope some of you are leaving inspired. I saw a few of you saying that, and I really appreciate that. That's why we bring them on. Again, I don't try to be dry. I hope you find the brief interesting and hear the stories in there. We do put a lot of quotes in the briefs as well, but I don't think anything really makes up for getting to hear some of those stories from some of the people and what they're really doing, and again, being able to follow up with them. So again, all that information on contact is on the slide deck as well. I think at some point in the chat here, it got posted. So feel free either to connect that link, or again, we'll be sending out an e-blast with both the recording and how to access the slides afterwards. And again, do take a minute to give us some feedback, good, bad, whatever. And again, don't forget to anything about how it worked today, to have chat plus questions all in the same place. Any feedback is always appreciated. It helps us inform and know what we're doing going forward. So I really appreciate, thank you. And I don't know if anybody else wants to say goodbye before I turn you off, but thank you so much for joining us today. Thanks, everybody.